This is Cabin Conversations, a regular podcast here at Woodlands Church. Hey, last week, I'm Dave Bonison here with co-host Whitney Swenson. Hey,
just
Whitney.
get too excited.
I was just going.
Skip,
so.
yep. Hi,
and
Dave.
co-host John Uten.
Assistant to the co-host.
Assistant, yes.
Tri-coast.
Tri-coast. For 3 more weeks.
Yes.
3 more weeks. And then we'll enter into contract negotiations.
That's fair.
We'll talk about renewing your contract for that. But I was reflecting on the fact that last week we talked about how much we loved meeting on Mondays and how healthy that rhythm was. And then the next 2 weeks, here we are on Tuesdays. So, yeah, it was fun. It was fun while it lasted.
It was fun.
So,
but here's the deal, is you have said it's as a regular podcast, and it almost turned into a non-regular for a little bit.
Yeah.
But we can do it.
Yep.
We got Tuesdays, afternoons.
We were gonna miss it, and we pulled it out back from the brink.
By golly, it might be a weekly podcast here for...
not going to make any
4 weeks.
promises.
We can do this. We got it. We got it.
But we were just saying that we're so encouraged by people being encouraged by this. Just a reminder, if you are encouraged by it, I mean, I'm so blessed when people thank me for it, or but at the end of the day, we're going to do it. But if it's beneficial to you, share it. Share it with others. So. I don't need to know it's fun. I'm having fun, but maybe others need to know it's fun,
right?
Especially if it is edifying, and that's our goal. That's our goal. It's not that it's a big thing. It's not that a ton of people listen. It's not that it goes beyond Woodlands, but that it blesses our local church community, draws us together closer to Christ, helping people faithfully follow Jesus.
Yeah,
right.
Both locally
and globally.
Yep.
So wow,
look at us do that.
But John, you mentioned, I was just going to jump right over here. You got some feedback.
I did. It was wonderful feedback for not having a meet and greet.
Yeah.
It was a very strong opinion, and I appreciate strong opinions. And it was a person who said, "Hey, I've got a list. If you need a list of why we should not do a meet and greet, I got a list, a long list." So yeah, I would. If she is listening, I'd say, "Hey, send your list. We'd love to see it."
Podcast at woodlandschurch.org.
Yeah.
Listen, we've gotten a list on the contrary to that.
We
So
have.
it would be great to compare the notes.
And that is the stakes of Cabin Conversations, is that your engagement will define whether we do a meet and greet during Sunday services.
Well, that's a little bit too much. I don't know if that's...
You're not willing to
I don't
lay
know if
those
I'm there
stakes
yet.
out
No,
there.
no.
So you are, at the end of the day, that decision will be made by a group of people, but we are part of that group.
We are.
And some of our voices, I'm gesticulating to our senior pastor, are disproportionately weighty in that decision-making process. Sure. The only elder among the MLT official.
True.
So this is a forum, a venue.
It is. That's what makes actually Cabin Conversations really fun, is when it is a conversation between those who get to listen and us that get to talk about it. And it makes it really fun when people respond.
So you can send in questions, podcast at woodlandschurch.org. You can text in questions to that texting number that you might, if you get the digital bulletin stuff, just text your question to that number, and then it'll come to us.
What's that number?
888-225-7675.
Nice.
So our AI that's now generating our summaries can pull that out. So AI, make sure you get that number in the description. I don't know what I'm doing.
Let's see if it works.
So let's see if it works.
Do you do your tidbit next, or do I ask you the question next?
The question.
The question that John answered and then I answered and you have yet to answer, Dave.
Yeah,
that's true. What has been feeding your soul lately? In terms of media, kind of.
In terms of media, kind of. What has been feeding your soul? I'll talk about some music. I could talk about books that I'm reading. And I've gotten such rich books recently. They're rich books and some podcasts that I've been listening to myself that have been really encouraging in terms of my biblical understanding and things like that, theological understanding. But I've been listening to 2 artists. One is named Judah. It's just Judah. And just some really rich worship. His 7+3 album, really, really good. And then Benjamin William Hastings, who I was like, this sounds like a really indie guy. And then I just found out that he's like the songwriter for Hillsong, doing solo stuff.
There you have it.
Cool.
He has some songs that are just really, really rich. Eden, Isn't It Just Like You? Where he talks a lot about God's sustaining, good, faithful love that just grabs onto you. He's a great bridge writer. I'm a sucker for a really good bridge. And so he has a song called Abandoned that Colton and I are talking about maybe doing on a Sunday morning.
Okay.
But the whole thing is that we're going to live abandoned, just like that uninhibited.
Mhm.
But you hear abandoned and you think it's about being abandoned.
Sure.
And you're like, I'm abandoned. Is that really worshipful?
Right.
So
Cool.
there's some loose in translation, but just really good bridges. Yeah. So
How do you find new music?
I listen to music on YouTube Music,
Okay.
and their radio playlist is just really, really good. So I'll start with an artist I like, Josh Garrels, Gray Havens, something like this, and hit
More coming.
radio, and then they kind of go off that.
Cool.
And then if I find an artist that I'm interested in, I'll listen to their album work and stuff like that. So, yeah. So I love good music that really feeds the soul.
It
So
does. There's something unique about.
There's a richness to it.
Yeah. Human experience of music.
The expression in lyric of truth.
Uh-huh.
So that's good.
Real quick, what books?
Oh, I would have a hard time remembering all the titles off the top of my head right now. So
Are you going to include them in the show notes? Oh, no, you don't do those anymore.
No, well, the AI pulls out media that's referenced actually as well. It's pretty
Since
crazy.
you're not referencing it, then
Yeah, I'll bring book lists next week.
Okay. Cool.
So some of them, and I just got 7 new books in to start reading. But one of them, I could say one of them is Knowing God that I'm working through as part of the Colson Fellows program.
Yeah.
And that's just such a rich, it's not like a casual read.
No.
Same vein as Mere Christianity, which is one of those books that a lot of people talk about as so formative, but it's actually really dense too.
You need to reread the paragraph like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, but as you do, there's layers of depth and goodness there. So J.I. Packer's Knowing God is just so good. And the importance, not just what it means to know God or how you know God, but the importance of actually doing the work to know God.
Yeah, Knowing God's one of those. I don't know if you guys have this. When you in college, I went through a phase where I really was starting to get hungry again, hungry for the Word of God, hungry for knowledge, hungry for understanding, just hungry for Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And so there's some, I call them the source documents, like or source literature, and Knowing God's would be one of them. Is just that really grabbed my heart, affected even how I think about who He is and ministry and all that kind of stuff. So there's this, like, it's one of my source ones. I've reread that.
You can't say any book is for everyone.
Yeah.
But if there's a book that, like, when you start getting serious about following and you really want to make Christ Lord and start digging in, Knowing God's one of those.
Yeah. Sure.
So there are people who are serious about following Jesus who haven't read and won't read Knowing God. But if you're like, what do I do?
Or we'll have a hard time with that one's.
It's a tricky book.
It's a pretty thick, dense. I think it's not thick.
Yeah, it's not thick. It's actually
dense.
really not thick at all, but it's really dense.
Yep.
Read slowly.
Yep. Take your time.
Yep.
So, hey, Dave's tidbit. Moving along.
Thank you.
We got a little.
I've been waiting all week for that.
So
practicing.
have you been practicing?
Yeah, in front of the
good.
mirror. Just,
That's good. I've got some trivia questions for you guys.
All right.
This is an astronomy question.
Oh no.
So how many moons does Saturn have?
7, 9.
Actually, 12.
146.
That's
what
what
I-
Good
I
try.
was going to
Which one
say
has 9?
146.
How many moons does Neptune have?
9.
142.
Yeah, 16.
Shoot.
How many moons
Nine,
does
See, I
7
got those
plus
mixed
9.
up. What
That's
happened
what-
is we just got this switched.
It's just one of those trivia things that you
It
just know.
happens.
How many moons does Mars have?
Doesn't have any. They got burned up. It's too close to the sun.
What? No,
Ooh.
Mars is further away from
Is
the sun
it?
than Earth.
Shoot.
Yeah, my
What's
very
that?
eager
Mercury.
mother.
Yeah.
Mercury's
yeah.
the close one.
So Mars has 2. Mercury and Venus do not have moons. Here's an easy one. How many moons does Earth have?
We already have a second one coming into orbit. Did you know that?
That's Dave's tidbit.
That was it?
Yes, that's
I'm
Dave's
sorry.
tidbit. You got it. You nailed it.
No.
And that's
That's not
awesome.
possible.
So
Stealing thunder.
we currently have a second moon. So we currently have 2 moons. We have captured an asteroid. It's about the size of a bus. It'll orbit the Earth. It's in an elliptical orbit around the sun.
Okay.
But it's currently been captured in Earth's orbit and will orbit for about a month, 6 weeks, before it goes on its
Shoots up.
merry way back to orbiting the sun. So
Here's the questions I had for our young adult small group.
we currently have 2 moons.
Like, how often does this happen? Does this moon come back off?
Mhm.
Like, is
This
it
one-
every 1,072 years?
I think
that it
this one will be
comes
back in 2040.
Oh,
I think it
not
was,
that
or
long.
another one will be here. There was another one in the 80s. Like, this isn't that rare.
Okay.
I mean, every
it's
40
the
years or so.
First time I've
It's a
heard
wonderful tidbit, though.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So you can't, I think I said that. It's about the size of a bus.
Yeah.
Maybe I said it's about the size of a moon. So
Something just landed on you.
there's a bug that just landed on you, Dave.
stink bug things.
It wasn't a wasp.
That was very exciting.
I'm just proud of you for not like
Freaking out.
freaking out.
So, thank
Good
you.
for you.
Um,
Although it would have been really hilarious. Now I'm disappointed.
Start screaming
it
a
didn't
little
work
bit.
out that way.
this is Cabin Conversations in the afternoon after we've had a lot of coffee all day. We have two moons. So
For
awesome.
a couple weeks.
for a couple weeks, about
And
6
she
weeks.
shoots off to another place.
Yeah. So
It's actually the sun's moon.
Yeah.
That's what I picked up from you.
Follow-up question.
it's an
What-
asteroid.
does it have a name?
Sheila.
For real? Okay. You
Just-
said that so confidently. I was like, well, okay, Sheila it is.
Yes, it has a title. So
Just wait, Sheila's in it.
you can't actually. It's called 2024 PT5.
Nope.
That is
So-
the worst name ever.
Well,
I
2024.
was going to name
for
my
the year
first
it
child
got
that, but I
captured.
didn't. I changed
So,
my mind. You're a 2024 PT5.
yeah, so there you go. So on November 25th, the asteroid will break free of Earth's influence and resume its regular. So that's longer than
Yeah.
6. No, it's about 6 weeks. Is November only 6 weeks away? November. Yeah.
November 25th is longer
7
than
weeks.
6 weeks away.
So that's
It's really
yeah.
cool.
So
Can we see it in our night sky
the
at
new
all?
mini moon is far too tiny to be visible to the
Okay.
naked eye, and commercial backyard telescopes and stargazing binoculars won't help much either. You
Okay.
need a special telescope. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's far away, and then dim. That's
Sure.
It's going to reflect very.
Oh, but
little
hang on a
light.
second. We are a university town that has
Mhm.
a planetarium that
Mhm.
might do something about
Mhm.
this.
They
Like-
might. I
Like
wonder
this
if they
time of
would.
year is when they kind of start kicking the planetarium back up in gear.
Dear listeners,
Who knows? That's
Yes.
information and getting
Yeah.
to us.
we might have a planetarium opportunity to see the mini moon. So
Sheila.
Mini Moon is
Sheila.
such a better name.
mini moon,
Mini
Sheila.
Moon Sheila.
So we'll check in the rest of Cabin Conversations. We'll check in to see how Sheila's
Next week's
doing.
Dave's Tidbits.
Sheila is still there. So, this week, step in as we were continuing along. Step into mission to
Yeah.
the mission,
Mhm.
into the mission.
Yep.
And just the opportunity to local and global outreach. The purpose of Woodlands to be a Christ-centered community, helping people faithfully follow Jesus, both locally and globally. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it was fun.
John, as putting you on the spot, because we haven't talked about this,
Sure.
but in your search process, as you were talking to Woodlands
Mhm.
and as you were getting introduced to our mission statement, our
Right.
purpose,
Mhm.
how did that, I mean, it's a church purpose statement,
Right.
but what about it stood out to you or was important to you?
Yeah, I think like I said on Sunday, most church mission statements should be similar. I mean, especially if we're Bible believing evangelical churches, we're going to find ourselves all kind of seeming to say the same thing in different ways. It's a restatement of Matthew 28:19 through 20. What sometimes is different about different mission statements is where emphasis happen. So I'll even talk about the Texas Woodlands Church. They have a kind of a part of their mission statement is about not being normal religion, like not being religious, but you kind of get the sense of more of a relationship as opposed to just your religiosity, so to speak. So there's parts of mission statements that have these nuances to it. And what was important for me in terms of what I saw in Woodlands was that last part that said both locally and globally. Sometimes, I mean, you can leave that off and it's still just fine.
Yep.
But there's a specifics to what that looks like that helps guide us. And so think about a mission statement. I use Lowe's with a shopping list as an example, which, by the way, I did go to Lowe's
That was a great
that
example, John.
next day.
Yeah, my wife and I just totally resonated with that. We were looking at each other.
Yeah.
we know what's going on.
I went to Lowe's without a list, and I did come back with more because I didn't have my mission.
You should have listened to your sermon.
And I met another Woodlander there. Hopefully he's listening, but maybe not.
Yeah.
And he went in for something for concrete and came back with a table saw.
Yeah.
Because
Congratulations
he didn't have
to
a
him.
mission.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. He had a mission to be
Yeah,
awesomer.
exactly.
So up
But
one table saw.
But anyway, but the nuances we have kind of give us more flavor for how we go about it. And so locally and globally tells me that we have a real intentionality of it's helpful. The list is helpful. The the clarity of those two places makes it helpful for us to go and accomplish that mission. And so when I think about the local, there's specific things that we're doing that I shared on Sunday. But honestly, all the ministry of Woodlands Church is local. Our small groups, our children's ministry, our student ministries, just even as going out of the doors of Woodlands into our community is all local. And so what sometimes happens is that global gets missed because we can think of ourselves as local. And we also tend to think that we're the center of the universe, and we're not. And so having the local and global resonates with me because I've loved international missions since I was, even before I was a teenager. I just loved international missions because I think there's a lot that has that we can learn from going internationally. So seeing global as a part of our mission was something as a candidate, John, that I really appreciated and got excited about. So,
it's really good.
Yeah.
Whitney, you're a global missions person.
Yeah.
As you think about it.
Yeah.
So that's an important thing.
Yes, it is. And so candidate John saw that. How does candidate John reacted to the reality here? Because part of this is even, I remember you were searching for a church, and we were also wondering how we lined up with our purpose statement. We brought Nancy Moore in and associates to say, here's what you say you do. Yeah. So the thing about churches is they can all have very common reiterations of Matthew 28 as their purpose statement. Right. But do you match what you say? Sometimes why Nancy Moore came in is to say, here's what you say you do. Do you actually do it? And that was a kind of a fun, hard, but also fun time to go through. What does Woodlands look like? So you looked at it, you saw it from afar. Now you're in it. Right.
When you're in, what does it look like?
Yeah.
How well do we match our mission statement?
Yeah.
It's a really great question. I've tried to mention some of those on Sunday, but one of the realities is that 12.5% of our budget goes to helping to support local and global missionaries or mission endeavors. And so that's not a small percentage. We can kind of take that for granted. I've known churches that have almost none of their budget goes to that specific of a line item, let alone 12.5%, which is close to $390,000 a year.
That's a lot of staff.
That is a lot of staff.
It's represented in that.
Exactly. And so that represents, I don't know how many people, Whitney, that...
I think we're at 26 people and then 2 teams.
Right.
Maybe it's 27. I don't know. We've had a couple people retire.
Sure.
When you say people, does that count couples as one or two?
It counts couples as one.
As one. Okay. So 26 different
units,
iterations.
Yeah. Or personnel. Personnel doesn't even count because Doug and Rachel Allard count as one.
Right.
Those.
Okay.
But we also have some single people. We also have some. We have 2 teams. We have families that are serving together. So
yeah.
So that's not a small thing. And so if you're saying how are we matching this mission of faithfully. I'm botching the mission statement right now that I just preached on.
Faithfully following Christ was the thing you said a fair amount of times.
Right? Being local and global, I should say. We are matching it. Just in that part, if we were just to say financially, and I also believe that where our treasure is, there our heart will follow. And so we do care very much about our missionaries and the ones that we're supporting. And what many people probably don't see is we have Vicki Newmiller, who's on staff, that reads their letters and prays for them and responds to them, and we know how they're doing in the field. It's not just sending dollars away; it's also a relationship that we have. Yep. And many of the people that are our missionaries have had a relationship with Woodlands. It's not. It's an intimate thing that we have with them, and so we are sharing in their mission together. And in some really cool cases, we get a chance to send short-term teams to be with them and encourage them and support their ministry and build that relationship even further. Not to mention the fact that, Compassion International, what we do with Compassion International and our partnership with them is not a small thing.
No, and it's also not counted in our budget.
No.
So there's the personnel, that's the $390,000 that goes to personnel on the field. So those are missionaries that are supported through dollars from Woodlands, but we also are.
And before you do that, I want to be clear too. Like we could support a lot more missionaries with $390,000 and 27 teams, but we make a very intentional commitment to provide a significant percentage of their support. When we invest in a missionary, it's because we believe in them.
That's right.
We want to be part of their mission, and so we want to be sending them, not just chipping away at that mountain of a need.
And it is a mountain of a need. So yes, we send them well. But we also put a cap on it. So we're not, so if Woodlands Church goes away, that missionary can potentially still stay on the field.
We want it sustainable.
Right. It's a sustainable thing. So missionaries that have broad-based support, not just a couple pillars, but have 500 people given $10 a month is different than 5 people giving 100, which doesn't do the math. Anyway, so that's personnel is a 390,000. We also have Compassion International. Do you remember the numbers? Was it like 300 people that support a kid in Bolivia and then 300 in Ghana? Like it was almost 50-50.
Like 600, we support 600
kids. That it does not come through Woodlands Church at all. They're just people that are part of Woodlands that have
600 kids
are supported through Compassion International.
And it's $40 a month?
38.
Thereabouts?
No, 43 now.
Is it 43?
I think it was 38.
600 kids? I didn't know this number.
Yeah. We just learned it.
Wow.
And so like that's the hard, like Woodlands is not just the budget we have. It's also what people do with their own personal finances above even that other number.
And that's one piece, Compassion International, right, of supporting kids. But then we also sent a team.
Well, hold on. Let's get more to that 600 because you're like, whoa.
No, I'm in for it.
We have about 60% of those are Bolivia. And we have 2 centers that are our main centers in Bolivia, which we also have a church partnership with. And then the other 40% is Ghana. And there's multiple churches in there that we have partnerships with. But I have a little bit deeper partnership in Bolivia, but who knows?
It's a longer partnership too.
It's a longer partnership. It's more singular.
It's singular.
We've sent more teams.
Yeah. And it's one center that has a daughter center, which is really cool. Where Ghana was, their centers are just smaller. So we had a cluster of 4 that are together. So there's more singular focused and longer term relationship in Bolivia. But Compassion is one of them.
Right.
And then what is not counted in 390,000 is how much money comes in to send people on trips.
That's right.
So there's the cost, there's the income expense, which usually comes out in the good. But that's a big chunk of money to send 3 adult teams.
That's right.
I mean, 3 adult teams, we sent 60 people?
Yeah.
60 people, and it was thereabouts 1,500 to 2,500 per team. 25, 2 to 3.
Yeah.
So 60 times 2, that's 120,000 right there. That's a third of our annual missions budget right in that. In addition to the annual missions budget, in addition to the 600 times 40, 24,000, or am I missing a zero? Whatever.
And then on top of that, because we can keep going on this, is situations like Phil and Terry Barker, who people are giving above their normal giving to just send them particularly, and they're not the only ones that are experiencing that. I mean, we have quite a few people who are connected to Woodlands that are being supported by individuals outside of what the church is supporting. And so the heart of Woodlands, I would say, is local and global. I mean, so the answer that what did I see? Almost like way more than I could have hoped or imagined. More than what I even could think of is what I see in terms of our heart for the mission. And I think that's the way it should be. I think that that is, at least it should be for us. I think that we want to see more people know Jesus as their Lord and Savior, have a transformational life that happens through that relationship with Jesus and the Word of God. So,
we've been talking a lot of dollars, but that's not the value metric. That's not the value metric is eternity change through God's faithfulness in the faithfulness of His people, if that's kind of a way to phrase it or something like that. And all we can do is evaluate faithfulness in that. And in that, we've seen Compassion to be an incredibly faithful organization, to be a humble, gracious, uses resources well, that sort of thing. Our missionaries are incredibly faithful in that, but we'll not know the impact until eternity for these things. And that's a freeing moment too, for that. God is on the move. That's remarkable. It's really good.
I like too that Woodlands has some crossover between local and global.
Yeah.
We have people that have gone on mission trips, have experienced had a cross-cultural experience, and then come back and say, what else can I do? And so Gordon Williams and Sarah and Ginny was a part of the team for a while. Keisha Kavlaskis is on it. Kelly Young are on this global welcome team that is welcoming people that are internationals, that are coming from an international space and living here in Stevens Point. So what does it look like to be a welcoming, hospitable, Christ-centered community?
Right.
That's so cool that that you can go experience have a cross-cultural experience, and then put that to work here by saying, I'm just going to lift my eyes up and look around. I think there's this, my daughter's in 7th grade right now, and there's this tendency, especially in that age group, to just be like, take care of yourself. Like what does it look like for me to be okay as a 7th grader in this space? And I just take care of myself. And it's a unique thing to find somebody that has their eyes up looking for others that are different or need somebody to reach out to them. Global Welcome is one of those that's crossing local outreach with global outreach. Our refugee resettlement team is another one.
An astronomical amount of work that goes into that labor of love. It truly is love of Christ and love for these displaced people.
Which has no dollar amount on any of that, but it's time, it's talent.
It's passion.
It's passion.
Yeah.
For people to know Jesus and to love them like he did. So I think that's...
And it should be pointed out, with as much... efficiency is not the goal in this.
No.
Some of these ministries are the least efficient at producing converts. The amount of time that's been poured towards refugee resettlement and amount of passion and energy that's been poured into families that are going through an incredibly, the goal is not efficiency. The goal is faithfulness. What has Christ called us to do?
Yep.
There are more efficient ways that we could spend our money if we wanted to bring more people into Woodlands Church or count the baptisms or something like that. But I have so appreciated, John, one of the things that I think I've probably said to you at different times with that local and global, that was global missions was such a heartbeat of Brian, and he guarded that so well. He was the one, as we were restating our statement, he was like, I just can't not put this in the statement of our purpose statement.
Yeah.
And if he had not taken that stand, I do think we would have drifted from it.
Yeah.
In the same way that I had this conversation a few times, it was like, if our next senior pastor isn't passionate about global missions, we will drift from it because it's something that Brian has really championed, and it would be really hard to have it championed from not the senior leadership. And so I'm grateful for that heart of yours, because it's something that we can't lose sight of. And it is too easy, Whitney, to your point, to become insularly focused or here and now. So
it's can I tell I'm sure I've heard the story. It was when I was interviewing.
Yeah.
This story, you know the story I'm talking about?
No.
I'm going to tell a story.
Okay, tell a story.
And I'm sure y'all probably have heard this story, but
are we in this story? Were you part of it?
No, you aren't in this story. I mean, no, you're not at all, actually. I wanted to make something up, but no, not at all. My first interview with Woodlands was you do know where it is.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you know the story. So what I loved about it was I had just been on a trip to Peru for, I think I was gone for like 10 days, and got back that Saturday night, preached the next morning, and then the interview was at 1:00 in the afternoon. And I was just so jazzed. Like I was fired up. It came from a mission trip. I'm loving life and excited about, talking to Woodlands. I didn't know Woodlands very well at this point, but getting to know them. It was my first time to actually interact with the Woodlanders. Sure. And really quickly, I don't know how else to describe it, but really quickly you could tell the understanding of missions inside that room. So for me, it was coming off a mission trip, and then going into a conversation with people like Sarah Williams, who has a real heart for missions, and
Cindy Groshek,
Terry
Schatt,
right?
Kelly Coor,
Exactly. So I'm fired up to be with people that are fired up about missions, and that was one of my first things. And so they would joke like, "Hey, yeah, we really like the fact that you just came back from a mission trip." But in my mind, I got to experience with people that were excited about missions and wanted to hear about that, and it almost quickly endeared me to Woodlands because their heart for mission was my heart for mission, and it was partnership. And That was one of my favorite moments. Was that moment?
Do you remember hearing parts of that, like in that, like as an MLT, Whitney? We were like, I forget exactly how it was. I forget how much we were getting briefed on anything that was going on.
Very little.
It was little.
That was one that we did.
Yeah, but it was like we interviewed this wild man who just came off the plane and preached, and then he's like half asleep, but he's on fire for Jesus.
I think some of them are like, wait, what's the pace of life for this guy? Like,
right,
what are we, like, if we're coming underneath him, are we going to be able to maintain pace of life?
Oh, no. So that Sunday I was out. Like, I was done.
Well, yeah, and then you've come on staff and been like the king of margin. Yeah. So, like, find margin, guys. Yeah. Like, yeah, okay. Show us how, chief leader.
I'm trying.
It's really good. Yeah. So let me ask a question. We're going to run out of time fairly quickly.
Do that well.
But I think this is both a processing, just an open-handed, like, I think there's answers. There's also like, whoa, let's process this. I was thinking about, we have so many great local mission organizations. The Moving Ministry, incredible. And they like local secular organizations refer to the Moving Ministry because they know what we do.
Right.
It's incredible. And then they pray with the people and just like, it's so clear. Carpenter's Crew, talked about Spring into Action, which is this incredible support to the school district.
Backpacks for Hope.
Backpacks for Hope. And there was a quote, my residents right now, they're in the Connections local outreach world. And they'd interviewed Beth Olson and they're like, oh, we just had so many quotes. And one of Beth's passions was, she's like, we always make sure we put things in those bags because if we feed their stomachs and don't give them Jesus, they're still starving.
Right.
So, Isn't that a fire quote?
Ooh.
That's like,
in Beth Olson, you have to like sit down and interview her, so to be able to have them pull out some of those quotes. And
they share that quote with me, and I'm like, oh yeah. So,
Beth, come on.
So we have that. But that said, pray and Moving Ministry, that sort of stuff. We don't have a local like outreach that gives the gospel. Like we don't have a preaching ministry or a gospel ministry, or we don't do outreach events, right? Where we're like, come to church and hear, that sort of thing. So interact with that. Like, isn't
that just the church's job? Like individuals of the church, that like the long-term slow, we just talked about efficiency isn't the goal. It's effectiveness. Eventually, and effectiveness is based on how the Spirit's going to move. But we come to church to be trained to go out and share the gospel. So isn't it the church's individual, the church?
I think that, I mean, I'm like
throwing it out there.
Yeah. I think that's part of it. I think it's the gospel, I think, is best spoken when we have relationships. Yeah. And so a lot of these are, the beginnings of some relationships. I also think that, I forget what I think it was. You'll probably tell me it's not the right person, but St. Francis of Assisi is
preach always and
when necessary, use words.
Yeah, I don't think that was anyone's. Actually.
I think
it's often attributed to
St. Francis of Assisi.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyway, it's a great quote, and I think that we still need to use words. I think sometimes
I like that you call him a sissy and not a sissy.
It's a sissy.
St. Francis, a sissy. Yeah.
St. Francis, what a sissy. Yeah.
I'll talk to him about it later.
Yeah, have a chat with him. I appreciate it.
So anyway, I feel mocked and made fun of. We're going to talk about community later, places of grace.
Yes,
anyway.
Grace abounds, your job.
Yeah, I know. So, but I think that we sometimes kind of limit the gospel when we just say it has to do with like the 4 spiritual laws or how we share it. Yeah. One of the things I hear some people say all the time is, I wish we would be trained on how to share the gospel. And doesn't the gospel start with how we interact with the world around us and how we show people what it looks like to be a faithful follower of Jesus Christ? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the first place we should be starting with when it comes to sharing the gospel, is that they would see Whitney or Dave or John faithfully following Jesus. And that's what it looks like. That's what a disciple looks like. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes we can miss those opportunities or we diminish it. Now, the great thing is that we also have to be able to speak words and share the hope that we have and why we have that hope. It's not just enough, I think, to go around and plow your neighbor's driveway or whatever. But I do think there's a piece to it that those things don't require a big preacher or anything like that. Like, we are all carriers of the gospel, and it starts with how we faithfully follow Jesus in front of the world to show people what a disciple of Jesus Christ looks like. And then, have the conversations. I hear oftentimes that people have come to the Lord because they reached out to say, hey, could you tell me about Christ? Could you tell me, I know you're a Christian, I can see this in you. And they actually are the ones that are pursuing Christ, not us like running after them. I don't think it needs those big outreach things as much.
One of the great ways that I have heard this described is that we do good works to produce goodwill that provides opportunity to share the good news. That's ultimately the kind of the progression or the process whereby why we do things. That's spring into action, I think, would be the heartbeat behind
Medical
that.
missions is that.
Right.
Yeah. So good works that produce goodwill. Like there's an in-between step. It's not that we're hoping at the end of the good works that we can share the good news.
Right.
It's that we are creating a culture, hopefully, where the community, one of the tragic realities, just the challenging phrase has been, if your church ceased to exist tomorrow, would your community care?
Right.
Would the larger, greater city notice or care? And I think that's based somewhat on false pretenses. The church is not primarily a welfare center or something like that. The church is a gospel-centered community. That's how our statement of faith starts too, that we're a Christ-centered community, or not our statement of faith, our purpose statement. But I do think that there's also we are to be doing good works because that's what Christ tells us to do.
Yeah, and I think the motivation is not just to do good works so that a person will come to know Jesus.
It's not a project.
It's they're not. That's not it's not a manipulative into this process. We want to love our community because Christ has loved us.
We're mediators.
We're mediators,
right? Of who God is. Like we're a priesthood. We mediate God where we are. So that's what good works look like.
Yeah, and so we would do it anyway because we're called to, and we love them, and we do love our community, and we are called to love our neighbor, and we hope and we pray and we desire for them to know Christ as their Lord and Savior. But it doesn't mean that we're trying to get in so that we can,
And it also doesn't mean if it's a difficult, like somebody's not coming to know the Lord and is resistant to it. It doesn't mean you stop loving them.
Right.
Exactly.
Either, right? Like,
there's not a time limit on our, you get 4 service projects and you haven't given your life to Christ yet. We're going somewhere else.
I have your punch card. You use the moving ministry twice. You only get 2 more left. No, it doesn't work like that.
No, the goal is, I've said this too. The goal is faithfulness. And part of being faithful is being Christ-like. And Christ worked in the lives of many for their goodwill because he loved people. Yeah. So cool. Well, hey, local outreach, global outreach. This next week, this next service is going to be absolutely cranking. It's going to be great.
Kind of a bonkers
generations,
service.
So step into generations. There's a lot going on.
A lot of moving parts.
Yep. So even in production meeting, we've gone over this service a number of times, but we're sitting there and Colton's like, and then the choir comes out. I'm like, there's a whole choir at the end of the thing. What? Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. It's a stacked service. So it's going to be a party. It's going to be fun. Come. We'll see you on Sunday. Podcast at woodlandschurch.org, 888-225-7675. We'll see. We'd love some feedback.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we'll see you. Bye.
Bye.